what's up, hello, my name is Emma, and today I'm going to be talking about the books that I read in February. This video is a little late this month, but like I'm in grad school. Like from here on out until I graduate, you can't expect me to have any videos up on time. February was a very interesting reading month for me. Firstly, I listened to 7 audiobooks, which is just incredible. Like I have been flying through audiobooks this year, and I've really been enjoying how much I have been taking in books in this format. I also read 2 physical books this month. I would have like 3 or 4 on this list, but it's because I spent like 2 weeks of February reading Jane Eyre. I read like the first 100 pages and decided to move on to some other stuff and like take a little break, refresh my reading palette, if you know what I mean. Have been enjoying it, not gonna talk about it in this wrap up because I'm not done yet, but like that took out a huge chunk of my physical reading time this month. And one more interesting thing about this wrap up is in February, I read my first 1-star book in like 2 years. I really hated a book I read in February, and luckily for you guys, it's the first book I read, so it's the first one I'm going to talk about. And that book is Hidden Bodies by Caroline Kepnes, which is the sequel to the book You. I read You sometime at the end of 2018, and I really loved it. It's just like a perfect psychological thriller told from the perspective of a stalker. It has an incredible TV show adaptation of it as well. So I fell in love with the book and the TV show, and I found out we had a sequel, so I was like, oh my god, I need more content, and unfortunately, it was a huge disappointment. Every good thing about You was lacking from this novel. It was entirely watered down and just a complete waste of my time. The reason why You is such a success is because Joe is such a dynamic character. Like, he's a god-awful person, but he has really confirmed reasons behind everything he does and is listening to his own perverse conscience. But all of that was lost in Hidden Bodies, and like the only word I could use to describe him is just straight up homicidal. Another fantastic element of You was the second person perspective, where it feels like the narrator Joe is speaking directly to the reader, and that just disappears in this book. And it took away so much of the magic and why You was so intoxicating, and it was just like a boring thriller, especially boring narrator. The plot was super underwhelming. Every single character was extremely vapid and one-dimensional. Like, You had these incredibly flawed but enticing characters, and like I just hated everyone in this book because they're so dumb and they had no layers. The only interesting part of this novel is when the plot starts to cross over to some of the events in You, because they are pretty separate. Like it's not like one plot line continues. Joe has a new story in this book. So when it goes back into like some of the events of You, it was great and I was having a good time, but it was not enough to save just like the disaster that occurred all throughout this novel. It was not good. It was not enjoyable. If you liked You, if you liked the TV show, don't waste your time. By the way, I actually listened to that on audio through my library because I was hoping to get the same experience as You. Not great. I bought the physical book because I thought I'd really love it because I loved You so much, but I was clearly very wrong. Next audiobook I listened to in February is Two Can Keep a Secret by Karen M. McManus, and I listened to this on audio through Scribd. This story follows 2 twins who are moving to their mother's hometown to live with their grandmother while their mother is in rehab. Wow, I just said mother like a lot in that sentence. In the past, some girls have gone missing from Echo Ridge, including their aunt when she was 17, and now as Ellery has just moved there, another girl goes missing. One of Us Is Lying by Karen M. McManus has been really hyped recently. I personally have no interest in reading it, just based off of the reviews. I don't think it's something I would enjoy, but Two Can Keep a Secret seemed like it was kind of up my alley, so I picked it up and I enjoyed it. I thought it was a fair book. There just isn't really anything notable about this book. Like, the writing was fine. It wasn't too dense or too flowery or too amateur. It was just like your run-of-the-mill gets the story told. One thing I did pick up on while reading is that it's kind of repetitive, where they like retell you the information you're supposed to know a million times. Like, every single time Ellery refers to her mother, she's like, my mother, who was homecoming queen and whose sister went missing on the night of homecoming, and she was dating this man who's also related to this person, and I'm just like, I don't need this every time you're gonna talk about this. Just a minor pet peeve. The characters were fine. I didn't abhor any of them, but none of them were really that special. I do think they all would have benefited from like a little bit more development each. I do know a big complaint about One of Us Is Lying is that the representation for certain populations wasn't that great, but All I can say from book 2 is that it seems like she's improved. Like, the main twins in this novel are Latinx. There's other people in this book who are of like a different ethnicity and also have different sexual orientations. So that was really enjoyable to see. It came across very naturally in the book, which I really appreciated. The plot was fine. Like, it wasn't the most intricate young adult mystery I've ever read, but it still kept me engaged and I was interested to see where things were going. I will say, like, the final plot twist, the big reveal, the end of the mystery was really shocking to me. I wasn't expecting it. And so as someone who does read a lot of thrillers, like, I can sometimes fall into a pattern of easily predicting things, so it's always really nice to get an ending that wows me. So yeah, 2 Can Keep a Secret is fine. If you're like a really seasoned mystery reader, I think it's one you could pass on because I think you're not going to be as fulfilled. But if you're someone who's like just getting into the world of trying new things like mysteries, it might be a good choice for you. I just don't have a ton of like spectacular things to say about it. I'm like pretty impartial overall. I gave it 3.5 stars. Next book I read in February is The Wicked King by Holly Black, which is the sequel to The Cruel Prince. I had said before that I read 2 physical books because I really thought I read The Wicked King physically, but I believe I actually listened to the audiobook on Scribd. So I listened to 8 audiobooks this month and I only finished 1 physical book. Luckily, I really enjoyed The Wicked King. I gave it 5 out of 5 stars because I just thought it was so fantastic. Holly Black's writing is just incredible. I'm a huge fan of her work. I've read so much of it from various different series that she's published, but I really appreciated it in The Wicked King. It's just very delicate, but also super powerful. I think she just really has a way with words, and I was totally encaptured while listening just because of the writing alone. There were so many beautiful quotes in this story where I just had to step back and was like, wow, like she did that. My absolute favorite thing about the Cruel Prince series, or it's actually called the Folk of the Air series, is the political intrigue. Like, I am so obsessed with Holly Black's ability to create these political tensions, these alliances, and like literally guide a society through being on the brink of war. I just really can't get enough of the politics in this story. Like, there's just so much scheming and betrayal and vengeance, and it just keeps me going the entire time. So the writing and the politics and the plot are what really draw me to the Folk of the Air series, but I did realize while listening to The Wicked King that although I love these characters so much and I think they are all so complex and multifaceted, I just don't care for the romance. I know that's like taboo to say because everyone is so obsessed with Jude and Cardan, but I've realized I just do not give a damn about their relationship. I'm not saying they don't have chemistry because they absolutely do. It's just I realized I would view this book entirely the same whether they were in a relationship and they had a romance going on, if they were just friends, or if they were enemies or just political allies. Like, their relationship would not change how I view about the story at all. And so it just reinforces that I don't care for the romance the same way other people do, and that's fine. Also, another really great ending. Like, I have friends who read The Cruel Prince way before it came out and they were dying for months because of the ending, and now I'm like, I understand. Like, we're on the same team now. So I'm very excited for book 3. I really enjoyed The Wicked King even more than The Cruel Prince personally, and I'm so happy I read it. Next, I absolutely pounded my way through some young adult contemporary novels on audiobook this month. The first is Pride by Ibi Zoboi. I think I also listened to this one on Scribd. I always get confused by which ones I get from Scribd and which ones I get through the library, but nonetheless, I listened to Pride and I really enjoyed it. I think I gave it 4 stars. Pride is a modern Pride and Prejudice retelling that follows a girl named Zuri. She is Haitian and Dominican, and she is fed up with all of the gentrification that is happening in her beloved Brooklyn community. So things start to really shake up when a richer family moves in on her block. I really liked Pride. I'm so obsessed with Ibi Zoboi's writing style. Like, damn, that woman knows how to write a book. Her prose is fun and authentic and beautiful all at the same time. And also, speaking on the writing, I really liked the inclusion of poetry in this book. I had no idea that Zuri was a poet going in, but there are some really beautiful poems that Zuri performs and like writes in this novel. So that was a great addition from someone who like doesn't love poetry. I was really pleased by its inclusion here. I also loved the big family dynamic in this book. Like, if you listen very closely to my reviews, you'll notice that's something I talk about a lot with young adult contemporary stories. I just love listening to families who have really strong relationships with their siblings, with their parents, who are super supportive and like it was sweet and fun, and I want to read more stories like it. I will say I didn't like love any of the characters. Like, everyone pretty much mildly annoyed me at some point, and I just didn't feel like as strong as a connection to them. But also, like, I'm thinking about it as like it being a Pride and Prejudice retelling. I've never read Pride and Prejudice personally, but I'm pretty sure like I've heard people say similar things about the characters then. So maybe it's intentional and it's just like the structure that the story is based off of. So they were fine, they were bearable, just not like super impactful for me. Overall, I think what draws me most to Pride is just the plot. Like, the storyline was just fun. I love a good, like, frustrating romance to start, even if I didn't care too strongly about the characters, and just like all of the different directions they go, the plot points and events, really engaging. I listened to it in like 2 days because it was just short and easy to fly through, so I greatly enjoyed it. If you were looking for a new contemporary novel, I definitely recommend Pride. The next audiobook I listened to in February was Monday's Not Coming by Tiffany D. Jackson, and I got this through my local library. Monday's Not Coming is the story of a young Black girl who returns home after a summer at a relative's to find that her best friend has not been answering her calls, does not show up to school, and is essentially missing, but nobody seems concerned. It's really inspired by the true stories of the many young Black women who go missing in America, who are not found, and there's not put a lot of energy into finding them. And I greatly enjoyed Monday's Not Coming. I also gave this book 4 out of 5 stars. I would say my gripes for Monday's Not Coming are a little bit stronger than those of Pride, as like they have the same writing, but I think I enjoyed the story of Monday's Not Coming more. This is a very intense story. It deals with some sensitive subject matter, and there's just like a lot of gritty emotional scenes in this book. But before I get into all of that, I just love the sweet, innocent friendship between two girls in this story. Monday and Claudia just have the most pure, innocent friendship, and I adored getting to know them. We get a lot of flashbacks through Monday and Claudia's history and like what life was like for them like a year ago or 2 years ago, and I just so greatly enjoyed watching these two girls who really just enjoyed spending time together and had a connection and were supportive for one another. It was really sweet. If you love books about friendship, I'd highly recommend this one. Speaking of the flashbacks, one thing I really didn't like about Monday's Not Coming is like the formatting of the timeline. Essentially, this book is told not only in like before and after, which is like a fairly common format for writing books, but it's also like 2 weeks before the before, 1 year before the before, 2 weeks after. Like, it was just a little bizarre, and it was also not chronological at all. It jumped around a lot, and it was just very jarring and confusing to read. My thing with unconventional narratives is that if it's executed well and it benefits the story, it's so great, and the book couldn't have been told another way. But there are other times where it's just unnecessary, it's just a stylistic choice and nothing more than that, and it doesn't come off great, and that's what I feel like Monday's Not Coming fell into. But like, you could still piece the story together, and it wasn't super intrusive. I just didn't really enjoy it. And similar to that, the other thing I didn't really enjoy about this novel is that there's like one reveal at the end that I just didn't think was a great choice. I don't think it brought the story to another level or really propelled anything. I think the story could have been told exactly the way it was and would have came off even better if just this like one element was taken out of it. In total though, Monday's Not Coming was just really remarkable to me. Like, I really loved those sweet moments with Claudia and Monday when they're like standing up to bullies, and then I really loved all the moments in the present when I'm just so stuck in my feels, like I'm upset because I don't know what's wrong with Monday, and I'm feeling so hard for Claudia, and I'm frustrated because no one is listening to her. I so feel her confusion when she is discovering things about Monday's life that she never knew when she thought that they were best friends, and there is just so much tragedy and devastation in this novel. It really packs a punch, and I just adore a book like that. So I really enjoyed Monday's Not Coming. If you are someone like me who really loves an emotionally gritty novel, something that's really gonna make you uncomfortable and think and just sit with your feelings, I'd highly recommend it. So the single physical book I read in the month of February was China Rich Girlfriend by Kevin Kwan, which is the sequel to Crazy Rich Asians. I feel like I kind of knew what my experience with China Rich Girlfriend would be going in, because while I loved the plot of Crazy Rich Asians and the drama was great, didn't love the writing and I had some issues, and all that of persisted into China Rich Girlfriend, and it also just wasn't as good as Crazy Rich Asians in my opinion. So that's what I was expecting. I just do of course wish I enjoyed it more. I think I gave the book like 3.5 out of 5 stars. I just don't like the writing in this book. It's not for me. It's not horrible, but it's just, it feels very amateur and underdeveloped. I don't like the omniscient narration in the story. I don't know why this bugs me so much because I have lots of faves that are also omniscient narration, but it just does not work for me in this book and it always frustrates me. Also, the writing is so unnecessarily and painfully descriptive. Like, the word I would use to describe it is superfluous. There's just so many name brands and names being dropped all the time, and it's not integral to the story. I think Common Spence talked about this when he talked about the first Crazy Rich Asians book. It just adds so much density to the story that doesn't need to be there because it's very lighthearted, but it's bogged down by all of these words that don't need to be there. Honestly, China Rich Girlfriend kind of felt like a watered down version of Crazy Rich Asians. Like, I wasn't as invested in the characters as I was in book one. Like, there are some people that I liked more, like Nick, but then there are people like Rachel who I adored in the first book, and I feel like here she was just like so saintly and unbothered and nothing could make her upset. There was just no spice to her character. So like I wanted a bit more from her, but she was just like super passive and didn't really contribute a lot. She's just so nice, and I love reading books about nice women, but she just didn't have a lot of the complexity I thought that was in book one. I really appreciated Astrid more. That's another person I really liked, but just pretty much everyone just like didn't keep me as engaged as they were in book one. Also, the drama was just not as salty. Like, I feel like Kevin Kwan really tried to like up the ante and make things more intense in this book, and it just made it feel like even further removed from reality and like not as easy to go along with as things were in book one. So I think there was a lot of room for improvement, and it just like went a little beyond where it didn't need to. I know I've only said negative things, and it seems like I'm really annoyed with this book, and that's because I was, but it was still fun and enjoyable, and I'm glad I read it. It's just one of those situations where like the negatives are much more prominent than the positives that do exist. I don't have a lot to say about them. Like, it had fun moments, there was some drama, was some good character development here and there. It's just that doesn't stand out as much. But I'm very excited to read book 3 and find out how it ends, and I'm super pumped for the subsequent movie adaptations that are coming for the next 2 books. So it's a good time, and I'm glad I did continue with the series this month. The next audiobook I listened to in February was Finding Yvonne by Brandy Colbert, and I listened to this audiobook on Audible because it wasn't on Scribd or Libby. That's like normally what I do. I check my library first, then Scribd, then Audible if I have to. This story follows a girl named Yvonne who has spent most of her life very invested in playing the violin, and she's always had these dreams of going to a music conservatory. But as she is ending high school, she starts to really call into question pretty much every aspect of her life, from her violins, her future plans, as well as her relationships. I really adored this book. I gave it 4.5 out of 5 stars. It was just so enjoyable, the same way that Little and Lion was, which is another book I've read by Brandy Colbert. So the only thing I really knew about this book going into it is that it dealt with teen pregnancy. So my vision of this book was, oh, so like Yvonne's gonna get pregnant in the very beginning, and we're gonna like follow her throughout her pregnancy. She's determining, like, does she want to have an abortion? Does she want to keep the kid? Does she want to give them up for adoption? And I thought that was gonna be like the main focus of the story, but I was very wrong, and I'm so happy I was wrong. Like, isn't that the best when you go in with certain expectations and you're like wrong and it's even better? I seriously underestimated the depth of this story. It was just so nuanced and complex in the best way, and like I don't think I had many criticisms that I feel would have made the book actually better. I think it was just so well executed. I loved Yvonne as a main character, and like watching her transformation. She really does start and end the book as different people, and it was such a journey watching her get there, and I loved it. Brandy Colbert writes very realistic yet authentic characters. She has a great teen voice and really does have a talent for connecting with the teen experience. So for example, Yvonne makes a lot of mistakes in this book, and I don't agree with her decisions so much of the time. And initially I was getting very frustrated, but then when I took a step back, I realized like she's a teenager, and this is what teenagers do, and I cannot blame her because I would be doing very similar things in her position. So I just really appreciated that. I just love watching her development and watching her grow and really think critically about herself, her own self-esteem, and her life. So if you like a really good character-driven book and you love YA, Finding Yvonne is one I would highly recommend. This is another story where I really enjoyed the exploration of family. Firstly, Yvonne is dealing with the loss of her mother, as her mother left her when she was younger, and like that's a hole that's still not filled. And while her father provides for her and they live nicely, she doesn't have any sort of emotional relationship with him, and she really starts to challenge that throughout the book. So I just appreciated that whole storyline. I thought it was very unique and refreshing, and it was just came together so well in the end. And as for the romance in this book, there is a love triangle, and I know like so many of you are like, oh, now I'm like taking it off my Goodreads and I'll cancel my Amazon order because there's a love triangle. But I will say, I think it's pretty different than a lot of young adult love triangles. Like, it's there is a plot line, but it's just much more subtle and realistic. I think it really mirrors how people do get connected with multiple people in reality. So I didn't mind that at all. And for like the story that Finding Yvonne is trying to tell, I thought it was done really well. Again, I just loved watching her question, like, is the violin really for me? Is my passion enough to commit my life to this, or should I be trying to figure out what else I want to do? That, as well as the teen pregnancy plot line, which was not super poppin' in this book. Like, it comes in much later, which, again, total opposite of what I expected, but it was done so well, and I'm super happy with the way that everything was explored in this book. So yeah, Finding Yvonne was a really good read. I thoroughly enjoyed it. I love Brandy Colbert, and I definitely want to read. She has another book out that I think that I haven't read yet, and I really want to. And just overall, I'm like so happy I read Finding Yvonne this month, and I would definitely recommend others to pick it up. The next book I read in February was Autobiography by Christina Lauren. I also got this one through my library, and it was supposed to be a buddy read with my friend Michael from Michael Book Lion, but Michael and I are just incapable of ever buddy reading anything. Like, I flew through this book in 3 days, and Michael like had barely started. So it wasn't like a total buddy read, but I still enjoyed this book. I think I gave it 4 stars. Is it 4? 4 stars. Let me tell you, I was not enjoying this book to start. I was very frustrated with it, and I was almost like, oh my god, why did I pick this up? It's all about this boy named Tanner who's bisexual, and though he is out to his family, he's not out to anyone at school because he lives in a very small Mormon community where he just doesn't feel comfortable being out with those people. So he ends up taking like a writing seminar and falls for the teacher's assistant, who is also gay, but he's in the closet. So I was like, I've read so many romances about gay boys who are in love with a closeted boy. Not that there's anything wrong with those stories, but I've read a lot of them, so it was feeling generic to start. And then I also did not like Tanner at all. I thought Tanner was so annoying and whiny and needy, and he just really frustrated me in the beginning. So when I started, I was not feeling it. I will say, as I got deeper into the story, I really started to appreciate it much more. Specifically, I loved the different areas of conflict, from, you know, Tanner and Sebastian having a secret relationship and having that be complicated by Sebastian being his mentor and Sebastian being a Mormon missionary and Sebastian not being in the closet, plus like Tanner's own interpersonal issues with like not being out to his friends and having friend issues. Like, there was just a lot going on in the story that I didn't start with, so I greatly enjoyed that. Tanner even grew on me in the end. Like, I realized like he's not super intrinsically annoying, he's just flawed, and so like I got to really appreciate his flawed nature as it went on, and I softened up to him a bit, which was really good. I really loved the way teen sexuality was explored in this novel. We follow Tanner, who's bisexual and super comfortable with it and has a very supportive family system, and so that was like a breath of fresh air to read in young adult novels. And then we also have the polar opposite with Sebastian, who feels like he could never come out to his parents and has really denied himself for so long to the point where he can't even recognize it. So that balance really just like hit all the marks of teen sexuality that should be discussed in this book, and I think it was very healthy and well explored and just like very, very pleasant to read about. It was just really insightful in that regard, and I appreciated the value that it brought to the genre of LGBT fiction. And another thing I actually really enjoyed about this book is the relationship between Tanner and his best friend Autumn, because I thought it was just like the perfect depiction of friendship in high school. Again, it also just dealt with a variety of different experiences that teens have with their friends, from unrequited feelings, choosing a significant other after your friend you've supported for so long, having to keep secrets from one another, not feeling comfortable voicing your frustrations at the other person or when they've hurt you, and also making decisions about college. Like, it was just really well-rounded, and I thought it was probably one of the most realistic friendships I've ever read in YA, so that's something I really treasured about this book. One thing that did bug me a little bit near the end is like out of nowhere we suddenly get Sebastian's perspective, and that's just like a big pet peeve of mine. I hate when authors write multiple perspectives that aren't even. It just makes the other person who doesn't get as much attention feel out of place, and I also just like the writing in it didn't feel great either, so I didn't enjoy that. Would have much preferred the whole book to be from Tanner's perspective. Overall though, Autobiography is a book that's really notable for me because like I did not like it so much in the beginning and I ended up really enjoying it at the end. It also did manage to like subvert those expectations of it being very generic when like it would hit things that were like very reminiscent of similar stories and then it would be very different as well. So it was fun, it was enjoyable. I get why it's so hyped. I don't think I enjoyed it as much as some other people in the community, but it was a good read and would definitely recommend. And the final audiobook I listened to in February was The Female of the Species by Mindy McGinnis. I feel like this is kind of like an iconic YA feminist fiction novel. So many people I know have read it and enjoyed it, and I'm really happy to like be able to jump on the train and say it was just as good as everyone said it was. It basically follows three characters, Alex, Jack, and PK, who are all a part of this small town, and it kind of just follows their different perspectives in dealing with topics like sexual assault, rape culture, misogyny, sexism, and it's just like a really beautiful exploration of all of that. I really enjoyed The Female of the Species. I gave this book 4.5 out of 5 stars. As soon as I started it on audio, I listened to it for like 2 hours straight, and that's like almost halfway done because this is a very short audiobook. And by that point, I was like, I just need a physical copy because I know this is gonna be a book that I love and will want to recommend and reread all the time. I feel like this is just a very dynamic cast of characters. All three of the main characters are like very individual and unique. They have their own important voice in the story, and it was just super pleasant to read from all of their perspectives. I really loved all of their interactions, and even the side characters like really intrigued me. There were some that like bordered on stereotypes and then later got more development and expansion, so like that was a fun twist on things, and just like the characters and the writing together in this book, beautiful. For me personally, I feel like The Female of the Species is kind of written like it's almost a thriller. It's not, it's a contemporary novel, but there's just like this era of like darkness and suspense that surrounds every scene in this story that was very unique and interesting. My only real gripe with this story is I feel like it could have done with more development. I still think that like pretty much everything about this book is like fairly well-rounded. I just feel like I could have used more and I wanted more. It's not that it was lackluster, I just feel like there was more room to give. But overall, I really enjoyed the story. I would definitely recommend this to like absolutely anyone. It's a book that I could totally see myself rereading multiple times in the future. I really enjoyed it, and I hope if you haven't read it yet, you would consider picking it up. So that concludes all of the books I completed in the month of February. Very diverse reading month, read lots of different types of books, read some great books, read some not great books. In the comments below, please feel free to leave me your thoughts on any of the books, if you have read them and if you agree or disagree with me, or whatever books you recently enjoyed or really hated. I would love to know. But that is it for this video. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you soon for a new one. Bye!